The warm Texas evening air drifted through the open windows of the Driscoll Hotel's ballroom, carrying with it the sounds of Austin's vibrant downtown, live music from 6th Street, the distant hum of traffic, and the energy of a city that never quite settled down. Inside, the annual TechFlow Solutions Company dinner was in full swing, with 200 employees celebrating another record-breaking year. My name is William Bill Thompson, and at 59 I sat at table 12 watching colleagues half my age network and celebrate around plates of expensive catering and glasses of premium wine. The crystal chandelier above cast warm light over faces glowing with the confidence of youth and success, their conversations filled with talk of IPOs, venture capital, and the kind of rapid growth that had transformed our small software company into a major player in the Austin tech scene. I adjusted my tie, the same navy blue one my late wife Margaret had bought me for our 25th anniversary, and tried to ignore the feeling that I was watching my own professional funeral. 6 months ago, I had been lead systems architect, the person younger developers came to when they hit impossible problems. Now, thanks to our new CTO, I was senior technical advisor, a meaningless title that came with a corner desk and no real responsibilities. The irony wasn't lost on me. The software platform that had made TechFlow Solutions worth $500 million was built on architecture I had designed 8 years ago. Every line of code, every elegant solution, every innovation that had attracted investors and clients, all of it traced back to late nights when I had solved problems that others said were impossible. Tonight I was about to discover just how little that mattered to people who measured value in GitHub commits and Slack messages rather than wisdom and experience. The trouble had started 9 months ago when our founder and CEO, Janet Morrison, hired Kyle Richardson as Chief Technology Officer. At 31, Kyle was everything the modern tech world seemed to value: Stanford computer science degree, previous experience at 3 unicorn startups, and the kind of disruptive thinking that made board members salivate over quarterly projections. I had tried to welcome Kyle, really tried. When he arrived with ideas about modernizing our development stack and optimizing our human resources allocation, I supported his initiatives. When he suggested implementing new agile methodologies, I adapted my project management style that had successfully delivered software for 3 decades. But it quickly became clear that Kyle's vision of modernization didn't include room for someone like me. In meetings, he would interrupt my technical explanations with comments about legacy thinking and outdated approaches. When I shared insights from my 30 years of software development experience, he would smile condescendingly and suggest that sometimes fresh perspectives are more valuable than historical knowledge. The systematic marginalization was subtle but relentless. Projects I had architected were reassigned to younger developers. Technical decisions I had made were second-guessed and often reversed, usually resulting in problems that I could have predicted, but was no longer consulted about. When clients specifically requested my involvement in their projects, Kyle would suggest they give the next generation a chance to shine. The final blow had come 3 months ago during a company-wide meeting where Kyle announced the new Innovation Initiative. Standing in front of 200 employees, he declared that TechFlow was moving beyond traditional development practices and embracing cutting-edge methodologies that reflect the future of software engineering. Then he unveiled the new technical leadership team, all developers under 35, all hired within the past year, all eager to prove themselves by implementing the latest frameworks and technologies regardless of whether they were appropriate for our clients' needs. My name was conspicuously absent from the leadership chart, and when a junior developer asked about my role, Kyle had smiled and said, "Bill will be transitioning to an advisory position where his experience can be properly utilized." The laughter that followed that comment had been polite but unmistakable. Tonight's dinner was supposed to be a celebration, but for me it felt more like a wake. I sat between 2 junior developers who were deep in conversation about cryptocurrency and the latest JavaScript frameworks. Their enthusiasm infectious, but their knowledge shallow. They spoke with the confidence of people who had never seen a system fail catastrophically or had to debug code written by someone who had left the company 5 years ago. "Ladies and gentlemen," Kyle's voice cut through the ambient chatter as he stood at the podium, his perfectly tailored suit and confident smile commanding immediate attention. "Thank you all for another incredible year at TechFlow Solutions." Applause filled the ballroom as Kyle launched into his prepared remarks about innovation, disruption, and the bright future ahead. He spoke eloquently about the company's growth, the new clients we'd acquired, and the cutting-edge projects that had established TechFlow as a leader in the Austin tech scene. This success, Kyle continued, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had never doubted his place in the world, is the result of our commitment to innovation, our embrace of modern methodologies, and our willingness to move beyond outdated practices that were holding us back. I felt my jaw clench as Kyle painted a picture of progress that conveniently omitted the foundation upon which all of this success was built. Around me, young faces nodded approvingly, buying into the narrative that everything good about TechFlow had started with Kyle's arrival. As we look toward the future, Kyle said, his smile taking on a sharper edge, we must continue to evolve, to embrace new technologies, and to ensure that our team reflects the energy and innovation that our clients expect. The implication was clear, even if it wasn't explicitly stated. The future belonged to the young, the innovative, the disruptive. Experience was a liability, wisdom was obsolete, and anyone who remembered how things used to work was standing in the way of progress. That's when I made the mistake of standing up. Kyle, I said, my voice carrying across the suddenly quiet ballroom, I think there's something important you're forgetting. The silence that followed my interruption was immediate and uncomfortable. 200 faces turned toward me, their expressions ranging from curiosity to embarrassment to barely concealed amusement. Kyle's confident smile faltered for just a moment before reasserting itself with practiced ease. Bill, he said, his tone carrying the kind of patience usually reserved for confused children, I'm sure whatever you have to share can wait until after the presentation. But I was already committed, standing there in my navy tie and 15-year-old suit, feeling every year of my age under the scrutiny of colleagues who had grown accustomed to my irrelevance. Actually, it can't wait, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. You're talking about the foundation of our success, about the innovations that built this company, but you're not telling the whole story. A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. I could see Kyle's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly, his carefully constructed authority being challenged in front of the entire company. The platform that generated $50 million in revenue last year, I continued, was built on architecture I designed in 2016. The client management system that Kyle just praised for its efficiency, I wrote the original algorithms. The database optimization that improved performance by 300%, that was my solution to a problem that 3 different consulting firms said was impossible. The room was completely silent now, but not with the respectful attention I had hoped for. Instead, I could see smirks on young faces, subtle eye rolls, and the kind of polite tolerance that adults show when a grandparent starts telling stories everyone has heard before. Bill, Kyle said, his voice taking on a sharper edge, I think everyone appreciates your historical contributions, but tonight is about celebrating our current success and future potential, not relitigating past achievements. The word historical hit like a slap. Around the ballroom, I could hear the soft sound of suppressed laughter, see the knowing looks exchanged between developers who clearly viewed my comments as the desperate ramblings of someone clinging to past glory. Kyle's smile was perfectly calibrated for maximum humiliation. Perhaps it's time to let the next generation have their moment. The laughter started quietly, a few chuckles from Kyle's inner circle of young executives, then spreading like ripples across the ballroom. It wasn't cruel laughter exactly, but it was dismissive, the kind of polite amusement that cuts deeper than open mockery. I think Bill's had a bit too much wine, someone whispered loudly enough to be heard, generating another wave of chuckles. Kyle raised his hand for silence, but his eyes were dancing with barely concealed satisfaction. Now, let's show some respect for our senior colleagues. Bill, why don't you sit down and let us continue with the program? The condescension in his voice was surgical, precise, designed to cut deep while maintaining plausible deniability. Around the room, I could see faces that had once sought my guidance now looking at me with a mixture of pity and secondhand embarrassment. You know what, Kyle? I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. You're right. Let me tell you about historical contributions. More laughter now, less restrained. I could see people pulling out their phones, probably recording this moment for internal Slack channels and social media. My professional humiliation was becoming entertainment. The security protocols that protected us from 3 major cyber attacks? Historical. The scalability solutions that let us handle a 500% increase in traffic without crashing? Historical? The code optimization that saved the company $2 million in server costs? All historical. Kyle's smile was widening now, feeding off the energy of the crowd. Bill, I think you're proving my point about the need to move beyond... Beyond what? I interrupted, my voice cracking with frustration. Beyond the foundation that everything you've built stands on. Beyond the experience that could prevent you from making the same mistakes that cost other companies millions. The laughter was louder now, more open. I could see Kyle's supporters enjoying the show, watching an old man make a fool of himself in front of the entire company. Some were openly recording, others were typing frantically on their phones, probably sharing this moment in real time. Ladies and gentlemen, Kyle announced, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had just won a decisive victory. I think this perfectly illustrates why TechFlow's future depends on fresh thinking rather than nostalgic reminiscences. The applause that followed was enthusiastic and sustained. I stood there feeling 30 years of expertise being dismissed as irrelevant rambling, watching my professional reputation crumble in real time. That's when I heard a chair scrape against the floor in the back of the room. The sound of the chair was followed by footsteps, deliberate and purposeful, cutting through the laughter like a knife. I turned to see Emma Chen, our youngest software engineer at 24, walking toward the front of the room with the kind of determined stride that suggested she had something important to say. Emma was brilliant, MIT graduate, published researcher in machine learning, and the kind of prodigy that tech companies fought over. She had joined TechFlow 6 months ago, and I had been assigned to mentor her during her onboarding process. In those weeks, we had worked together on complex algorithms, debugged impossible problems, and built the kind of professional relationship that transcended age differences. "Excuse me," Emma said, her voice clear and strong despite her obvious nervousness. "I have something to say." Kyle's confident expression faltered slightly as he looked at Emma with obvious confusion. "Emma, I'm sure whatever you want to share can wait until..." "No, it can't," Emma interrupted, her voice gaining strength. "Because what just happened here is wrong, and everyone in this room knows it." The laughter died instantly, replaced by the kind of silence that follows a car accident. 200 faces turned toward Emma, their expressions shifting from amusement to curiosity to something approaching concern. "You want to talk about innovation?" Emma continued, her voice rising with passion. "About fresh thinking and modern methodologies? Fine. But let me ask you something, Kyle, and everyone else in this room." She turned to address the entire ballroom, her young face serious beyond her years. "When you hit a problem you can't solve, who do you go to? When your code breaks in ways you don't understand, who explains what's happening? When you need to understand why a system was designed a certain way, who has the answers?" The silence was profound now. I could see faces around the room beginning to shift, expressions changing from amusement to something approaching shame. "You go to Bill," Emma said simply. "Every single one of you. I've watched it happen dozens of times in the 6 months I've been here. You mock his experience, you laugh at his historical contributions, but when you're stuck, when you're lost, when you need real guidance, you go to the man you just humiliated." Kyle's face was beginning to redden, but Emma wasn't finished. "You want to know about the platform that generated $50 million in revenue? I've seen the original code. Bill's digital signature is on every critical algorithm. You want to talk about the security protocols that saved us from cyber attacks? I've read the documentation. Bill designed them after studying attack patterns that most of you have never even heard of." She turned to look directly at Kyle, her eyes blazing with controlled fury. "You want to know what's really historical? Historical is pretending that innovation happens in a vacuum. Historical is thinking that fresh thinking means ignoring everything that came before. Historical is silencing the person who taught most of us everything we know about real software engineering." The room was completely silent now, but it was a different kind of silence. Not the uncomfortable quiet of witnessing humiliation, but the profound stillness that follows truth spoken with courage. "So here's my question," Emma concluded, her voice carrying across the ballroom like a bell. "Why are we trying to silence the man who taught us how to think?" The silence that followed Emma's words stretched on, heavy with the weight of truth finally spoken. Around the ballroom I could see faces that had been laughing just moments before now looking down at their plates, unable to meet my eyes or Emma's. The phones that had been recording my humiliation were quietly put away. Kyle stood frozen at the podium, His earlier confidence completely evaporated. The polished presentation, the dismissive authority, the casual cruelty, all of it seemed to crumble under the scrutiny of someone who had simply asked the right question at the right moment. Kyle began, but the words seemed to stick in his throat. Emma wasn't finished. She pulled out her laptop and connected it to the presentation system with the kind of technical competence that commanded respect. "This is the code repository for our core platform," she said, displaying a screen full of commit histories and timestamps. "Every major innovation, every critical algorithm, every elegant solution that made this company successful, they all trace back to one person." The screen showed my digital signature on dozens of files, dating back 8 years, proving beyond doubt that the foundation of TechFlow's success had been built by the man they had just tried to silence. "Bill Thompson didn't just contribute to this company's success," Emma concluded, her voice steady and strong. "He created it. And instead of celebrating that, instead of learning from it, we just spent 10 minutes laughing at him." One by one, people began to stand. First, it was the other engineers I had mentored over the years, then the project managers who had relied on my expertise. Finally, even some of Kyle's own team members rose to their feet, their faces showing a mixture of respect and shame. The applause that followed was different from before, not the enthusiastic approval of Kyle's presentation, but the deeper recognition of truth acknowledged and respect finally given. As I looked around the room at the standing ovation, I caught Emma's eye. She smiled, the same smile that had lit up our mentoring sessions when she finally understood a complex concept. Sometimes I thought, the most powerful voice in the room belongs to the person brave enough to ask the right question. If this story moved you, if you've ever watched someone with experience be dismissed by those who should be learning from them, please share this video. Sometimes the most powerful defense of wisdom comes not from those who possess it, but from those who are humble enough to recognize its value. Subscribe for more stories that remind us that innovation isn't about discarding the past. It's about building on the foundation that experience provides. Remember, behind every outdated older worker is often a lifetime of knowledge that the next generation desperately needs. Respect isn't just about age, it's about recognizing the shoulders we all stand on.